Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Soft Rebellion. My name is Ntatu and thank you so much for joining me. So it's a little bit silly, but today I think my dog has taught me something that I've learned since childhood, and it's really affected how I show up in relationships, right? He was humping. He started humping a couple of, weeks ago. The last time we saw a vet, she told me that Bobby was going to start humping, and I shouldn't be surprised. And by then, he had already started, and I had the biggest shock of my life because I'm like, where did you learn that? you know? And yeah, I was just traumatized. But when it happened today, I think I expected it a bit more. So I was okay. But I could see every time he saw my face and I was shocked, he would stop. So then I just started looking away to give him the privacy. And I know it's silly, right? But it just occurred to me that, hey, it's something he does naturally. Even vets, his doctor knew that it was something that he was going to do, and so I should expect it and not something that I should reprimand. It got me thinking about my childhood and how I grew up. Now, I wasn't humping, but there were feminine traits that I presented, which adults then interpreted as my attempts to try and gale the male attention, which wasn't at all the case. I remember, I've got a very peculiar walk, or a cat walk, if you will. It's not exactly a cat walk, but I do shake myself when I walk. I've tried to stop a lot of times because I was bullied for it. And I remember when I was in high school, and we lived in Orlando, I'd come back from school, and when just before I arrive home, there's a corner I'd need to pass. The local boys would hang out around there, and when I approach, a couple of them would also walk towards me, pretending to walk the way that I do, obviously exaggerated. But it was just to mock the way that I walk because I shake myself. I remember being younger and entering a contest. This other lady, this was now in the rural areas, she used to cheer the hell out of me because of the way I walked. And I mean, it's known that in beauty contests, people walk in a particular way, and my walk was right up there. But obviously I was chubby, so I don't know. But yeah, I think back to how I grew up, and any signs of being feminine, being reprimanded. And this line of thinking was also, I think I came across another creator on TikTok, Asi, and she was retelling her stories of growing up as a woman in the Eastern Cape as well, and how that was looked down upon because any portrayal of femininity was always associated to a man. And I've really struggled with that idea so much, to a point where I've rejected my feminine side. It shocks me every time when people say, oh, you're so feminine. And it's also such a compliment, a beautiful compliment, because for the longest time I didn't see myself as feminine. I barely do my hair. I wear my hair in its Afro natural state. I don't wear any makeup at all except for a lip gloss. I don't do lashes anymore because fake lashes, take out my original ones. I used to have nice long lashes. Now they're gone completely. So I don't do those anymore. And it's hard for me to see myself as feminine outside of those things. Even the way that I dress, I wear baggy clothes mostly. I love shorts and tights and gym wear because I'm always in active gym stuff. It's comfortable. So I don't see the way I dress as overly feminine, and I think some of the guys who've shared an interest in, pursuing a romantic relationship with me have also noted that I'm not feminine. And sometimes they want to come home and have cute girly conversations about bags or a new restaurant I wanted to try or nails or whatever. And I'm like, yeah, I am those things, but it's not what concerns me. It's not what takes up a lot of headspace in my mind. I think about consciousness. I think about socio-economic status of our country and its impact on us as young people. or as young people, I think about geopolitics, and how they are affecting my purchasing power, my buying power as a consumer. Those are the things that plague my mind, and I love talking about those. I think about identity politics, and societal conditioning, and how our society currently grapples with those ideas. Those are the things I care about. And it's not really feminine. But I promise you, every time I see women, mostly who know me from TikTok, they're like, oh my goodness, you're so feminine. And it's always such a surprise to me, but a welcomed one, because I do see that as a compliment. And it's almost testament to the fact that even though being feminine is something that was discouraged growing up, something that was drilled out of me, it still exists. And I think femininity has become such a swear word because it's often something we do for the male gaze or to attract the male attention. But what Asi was saying earlier is that femininity exists for its own sake. It exists in isolation, not because of men. Women exist not because of men. We exist all on our own, for our own selves and for our own pleasure and enjoyment, not for that of men. And I think about how women who dress up in society are always labeled names. And this was the case growing up as well. Women who paid attention to their appearances were always accused of being bitches, pardon my French, or being hoes or whatever. Because I suppose the society at the time just couldn't fathom the idea that a woman could exude femininity for her own enjoyment, for her own sake. It always had to be tied to a man, and I think that's because we're so patriarchal in nature, or rather societies have assimilated to patriarchy, and we always center men in everything that we do. But I think about also like how women going to clubs is interpreted as wanting to see a man. Like I remember growing up, and I would want to hang out with my friends, go and play. And my grandmother would say, Ufuna ndoni pandle, like what do you want outside? Ufuna bafana or whatever, It was always implied that by going outside of the yard, you're going to look for boys, and nothing good comes from boys or men, And that was so unfortunate. I think that's where part of my fear comes from regarding relationships, because men were always portrayed as this evil thing and yet shaped so much of our existence, I remember when I think about where that fear comes from, or my first encounter or my first awareness rather, of boys in a romantic sense, is imbued in fear, mostly because of these two encounters. One, when I got my period, right? I remember being in a river. We used to wash our clothes in a river because we didn't have running water. So we'd go to a river, walk for 30 minutes to an hour, carrying a bucket of a vascom, really, of dirty laundry with detergent, and would wash the clothes. And because they would be wet, we'd have to dry them on the grass next to the river. Then after they've dried, pack them, fold them, and then come back home again and do the same trip. I noticed when I was done washing the clothes, and we're about to bath. So after washing the clothes, obviously you're about to cause a mess and splatter or splash water on yourself, and they would leave stains. But also it would be wasteful to just come all this way and not have to bath. And so we'd always follow, a laundry washing session with bathing in the river. And when I took off my panties to wash them, I noticed a blood stain. Now, I'd never been told anything about expecting my menstrual period or what it means, and I was just scared. I went into a panic mode. And I was with a friend of mine, Ukanyisa. I never said anything to her. But I just washed the panties quickly, hid. But I knew I had to tell my grandmother. All I remember is feeling like I'd done something wrong. I felt like, oh, there's something wrong I'd done. And I also remembered a story where one of the girls who we attended class with, she's one of the girls who used to pay close attention to how she looked. She would always be clean, washed, her lips moisturized, her hair combed nicely and neatly, And apparently a couple of months before, there was a rumor going around that she liked sleeping with boys and that she had slept with a whole lot of boys. And reasons for that was because she was bleeding. They were like, she slept with so many boys, she was bleeding. They found a stain on her pants or a dress or something like that, Now here I am with a blood stain on my panties, but I couldn't recall a moment where I'd slept with boys, so I really didn't understand why I had this, and it felt like I'd done something wrong. So I knew I had to tell my grandmother, but I just dreaded it because I knew it was wrong. Like, it just was. I don't know why it was wrong or why. Like, I just knew, guys, it was wrong. And I knew I'd be reprimanded for it. So, Nyani, I go home. I find a moment. I have no idea how I even told my grandmother. But I told her, and it was the hardest thing I had to do. And Vele, the speeches about boys and staying away from them came, and pregnancy and fear mongering. And now I really was not permitted to go outside the yard to play. Somehow I'd become a woman now and I really couldn't play. My life became about cooking for the family. I couldn't have been in grade 3. I think I was in grade 3, yeah. Standard 1. I must have been, I don't know, guys. I think, how old was I? 9 years old or something? I don't remember, but I was still fairly young, and my life then just became about, doing domestic chores and going to school, coming back from school, and then doing chores. That was my entire life. And the second encounter that really left an imprint in my formative years and my perceptions of relationships is when I'd gone to live with my aunt Emakeni. So my aunt was married and had little kids, but she fell ill and took the kids home to my rural home with my grandmother. Then she left me with her husband. And I remember one Saturday, I hadn't gone to school. Actually, I was home cleaning and doing my laundry, washing my school clothes. And while I was doing that, I was left alone. But 2 boys showed up. They showed up and they were like, hey, we've been sent by your uncle to fetch you. There's some groceries that they've bought and you have to help us carry them. And I felt awkward about the entire exchange because, remember, I'd been told about boys. And now here I am alone with boys, 2, not 1, but 2. And I don't know how to act. I'm just awkward. And my uncle used to be so strict and he used to beat the hell out of me. Like, I'd lose a ball pen and he would beat the life out of me. Someone going to fetch a tree branch and he would finish on me for losing a pen. So I was just always scared. And now here I am with boys, something that's so wrong. We're all alone. And yes, we're walking out in public, but I'm still so scared because my uncle is very strict. And he's not the one who's given me an instruction, but they told me he said so. And they even pointed to his location where he was standing and watching us. So I had a very keen awareness of the fact that he was watching. Now I felt even more awkward and I'm walking behind these boys. I remember holding my hands in front of me and not knowing what to do with myself because that moment also felt wrong. Like, being in the presence of those 2 little boys felt so wrong. And knowing that my uncle was watching me just gave me even more anxiety, and I knew that it would be a conversation, like a topic of discussion much later. And, almost with certainty, I knew that I would be found guilty of something. So that's another encounter I always think about in regards to, why I always fear romantic relationships so much, or, the memories that have shaped how I see relationships and how I perceive men in general. Since then, there's been so many other encounters where men have acted violently, and I suppose it fed into the already existing fears of run away from men, men are dangerous, and then, of course, pregnancies that then followed in our village much later also confirmed those stereotypes that I'd formed about what relationships were, but also the dangers of allowing men into your space and being in relationship with men, So, but I always think about that. And I think about the moment where the two boys came to the house, and I constantly wonder, what about that moment my uncle felt was wrong? He said to me, and this stuck forever. And I mean, I was in grade 2 at the time. I was very young, guys. That's why I think I was 9 years old, because in grade 2, I was 9 years old. He said to me, I saw you walking with those boys. And I thought, okay, you sent them. And he said, you wanted them. I know you wanted them. And I remember being so confused by that line of questioning, which was almost matter-of-factly, but also the statement didn't make sense to me, because what do you mean I wanted them? Like, I knew nothing of relationships at the time, jolo and whatnot. So or even sex, like I had no context whatsoever. So when he's saying these things, I know I'm wrong. I know he's found me guilty. He's already decided that I'm guilty of something. But I have no idea what he's talking about. So I can't even defend myself. Like, if I'm saying I don't want them, like, you know what I mean? Like, I was just so confused. And so what I gathered from that exchange was that wanting men is wrong. Wanting boys is wrong. So I should never want boys, And I think I've carried that feeling for so long, even when I then started dating. I remember much later on when I was in varsity, and it didn't feel like, okay, exploring relationships with men would be such a dangerous thing anymore, because, I mean, I'm a grown-up now. I've made it. Whatever fears you guys would have had about me growing up and not amounting to anything don't hold anymore, because I've passed my matric. I've gotten into this university. And so I opened myself up to dating this boy. His name was Whaley. He liked me. He really, really liked me. And I remember telling Bali's dad, he was a paternal figure in my life. I knew him from church. I don't know, I just wanted to tell an adult that, hey, I'm in a relationship, I'm dating someone now. Partly for their approval, but also to tell me that it's okay, like almost to give me permission that, hey, this is not wrong. You're not doing anything wrong. It's a very normal human experience to have. And I remember Bali's dad going into panic mode, and he said, did you sleep with him? That was his first question. And I'm like, no, and I was so confused, why would you go there? Adults are so weird. And I'm like, why would you go there? And he said to me, you must break up with him. You must end that relationship, because it's not what God wants for you. Don't. And I was so confused even then. But because I hadn't really formed a strong identity outside of church, outside of the parental figures in my life, and I was navigating this new space in varsity, I really, really wanted to impress, my mom and the parental figures around me, Bali's dad being one of them. So I complied. I ended up breaking things off with this guy. And he was so distraught. I don't think he ever got over that. He was so distraught, guys. Mostly because it came out of nowhere. And the other part because I handled it so poorly. I had no idea how to do that. But it was really, really uncomfortable. And I think for me, it solidified the fact that men are dangerous. Boys are dangerous. Being in relationship with men is dangerous. and love and romance is not something that's in the cards for me, and I think exploring that part of me which existed, that desire did exist even back then, because maybe not a desire at the time, a curiosity existed, but it was always discouraged by the people in my life and labeled as something wrong, and I don't even think the curiosity existed because of a specific man in my life. It was because it's something that existed within myself, and there was no room for me to explore that within myself because it was always tied to men. And we've decided that men are these evil people, this evil group that will just tarnish and taint my purity, and so I need to stay away from it. And as much as I try to run away from it, I haven't outgrown that, indoctrination, that conditioning. It still exists. Yes, I do have a desire to pursue relationships with men, but the conditioning that men are dangerous, men are not safe, men ruin everything still exists. But also the conditioning that I'm wrong for wanting those things, that it goes against, my natural instincts. I'm disappointing someone for wanting those things exists. And that's why I speak about these things publicly, because I can only imagine how many other kids have been in the same situation that I've been in. 31 years later, I'm still trying to work through some of those things. And I'm not succeeding, by the way. It's not something that I can say I've completely put behind me, because there's still a lot of fear attached to the idea of romance for me and wanting to be in relationship with men, because of the way I grew up. Certain people have gotten over it, but others, I see how it's ruined their lives because they fell right into the fears, the cautionary tales that were being warned about. And I think because there wasn't any honest reflection or honest relationships about what being in relationship with men looks like, what to expect, how we should, behave and be aware of and protect ourselves. Those conversations didn't happen, and so they really left us vulnerable to those gaps being filled by men, There's a saying that men are liars, especially closer men. They are liars, and their lies are very nice until the consequences come up and they run. That's the story we've been told. But I think those lies are effective because the adults in our lives haven't had conversations that will fill in the gaps and the questions that we have, which leaves room for a second voice, a third voice to fill in that gap. And they will obviously tell us lies because they want something, right? Or there's a certain agenda. But the people in our lives who don't necessarily have an agenda other than keeping us safe, seeing us thrive, have the opportunity to fill in those gaps and answer questions, and for us to take that as the Bible, as the truth, without ever questioning, But now we're forced to believe people outside. I remember when I eventually started dating, this was now after varsity, and I'd been working for 2 years. I had my first real boyfriend. He would say certain things. I think he was 5 years older than me. There's certain things he'd say about my own body which didn't feel right. But because I didn't know much, there was room for him to say certain things, right? And I'll take them because, okay, he has kids. He had 2 kids. And he's much older, so maybe he's right. Maybe he knows better. I'm not the only woman he's been with. So he knows. But I later found out, no, man, that was so wrong. And because I lacked information, I lacked understanding, and the adults in my life didn't have those conversations with me, it just meant that I was very easy to manipulate. I was very easy to control. And I think about church as well, and how it makes us the perfect victims for manipulation, for indoctrination, because so much of church relies on mystique and secrecy and a lack of information, and not questioning. You can't question God's will. You just need to accept it as it is. And when you find people who understand that language, who are within the church domination as well, or denomination, I don't know what it's called, but people within the same, religious environment can use that to manipulate you. This was the case with Simpiwe as well. luckily had come, into my own voice by the time he had an encounter with me. But I imagine if he had found me when I was still 23 years old, 24, 25, 26, when I wasn't as strong as I was then, in my own voice, I would have been prey. Like, I would have been prey, to his misdeeds. And I think about how many church people have also trusted men and have trusted boys that, hey, what they're saying is truth, what they mean it, and not look at actions, but what people say, because we haven't had exposure. We haven't had these honest conversations. And the people in our lives also didn't open up about their own fears about what our lives would amount to if we fall into a particular path. I think it's more prudent and productive to talk about what they're afraid of instead of actually just projecting those fears as wanting to look out for us, and telling us or sharing as much information as they can so that we fill in the blanks. You're not going to protect me by keeping me in the dark. You know what I mean? Because I'll always be curious about what's out there. But if you share honestly your experiences and you tell me your experiences, then you're at least empowering me with knowledge to not repeat those things, or to at least identify patterns when something happens and I'm like, no, man, but my mom has already told me about this, or my grandmother has already told me about this, or my aunt has already told me about this. And when a random boy comes and says, oh, your body is reacting this way because of 1, 2, 3, you can actually call him bluff because he's lying and you understand your body better. You know what I mean? You can call that out. I remember looking back, this is TMI, by the way. I think I may have had an infection, but I didn't know much about infections, right? There was just a weird odor that I didn't understand. And I was like, where is this coming from? Because I've never, ever had this in my life. And at the time, I don't think it's kind of conversations that as women we talked about. So there wasn't even room to have those kind of conversations with my girls either. And I remember the guy brushing it off as, oh, it's probably 1, 2, 3 or whatever. There wasn't any major discomfort, so I didn't feel the need to consult a doctor or whatever, But later on, when it happened again, I was like, oh, and when I found out more information, I was like, oh, you were sleeping around and you weren't using protection. So actually you were exposing me to infections, and diseases and whatnot. But because I didn't have any awareness of that at the time, and I trusted someone at face value, I exposed myself. It left me vulnerable to all of these things, So I really think information sharing is so important, and being honest is so important. And for me, a great disservice was to discourage those conversations from taking place with the grown-ups in my life. And that's why I share so openly, because I never want to see another woman, young woman or young man, fall into a trap because they didn't have information. But I also want to break this stigma that our existence is tied to the other gender. We are entities, sovereign entities, all within ourselves. It isn't tied to another person. It isn't tied to another gender or race or whoever. These false dichotomies do not exist. And so my existence isn't tied to a man. I can exist all within myself, and my femininity is for my own enjoyment. It's for my own self-expression. It's not because I'm trying to, secure a bag or attract someone or, close the deal or whatever the case is. A friend of mine, P, love her to bit. She tagged me on one of these Valentine's Day singles table situation. It's like a speed dating event, and the idea that I would have to dress up and like go to an event for the sole purpose of meeting someone was just so daunting, because I was like, I don't think there's anything I do deliberately to meet someone other than downloading an app and swiping right? But I remember when I started talking about my journey to finding the love of my life on TikTok, people would say, oh, you need to find hobbies. You're lonely, you're centering men, don't. You need to find hobbies, and you'll find people doing the things that you love. And I'm like, I have a million hobbies. Already, tomorrow a friend of mine has invited me to an Under Armour event. It's a fitness event. In the morning, I'll go run, take my dog to the vaccine. He's my hobby, by the way. He makes my life. And then the following day, I've got a race. I'm going to be running. I hike. I play paddle. I was supposed to play paddle today, but because I'm running on Sunday, I need to conserve my energy. And I can't afford any injuries. I do a lot of activity, but I don't do activity with the purpose of meeting a romantic partner. If anything, I'm always zoned in when I do those hobbies because I'm doing them for the enjoyment of that particular hobby, to stretch myself, to move my body. I love moving my body and keeping fit and connecting with my friends and talking smack, like Uzimi was saying the other day. Amanda, there's this other girl we play with. Amanda will play both sides of the court, and she gets so angry when then she starts playing competitively. And those are the kind of things I enjoy. I don't go there, with my eyes open, but, oh, this could be the love of my life. Oh, this could be the potential. I feel like that would take away from being in the moment, from being present and really enjoying that activity for its own sake. So even having multiple hobbies and interests isn't going to help the situation, by the way. And so I don't like doing anything for the sole purpose of meeting someone. I think our existence is far bigger than that. It's about something far bigger than that. And deriving joy is a very big objective of mine, in everything that I do. Being present and being in the moment is something that I cherish as well. So I wish the messaging that we can promote is for people to exist for themselves, women especially, to exist for their own enjoyment, explore their femininity and all their interests for their own sake. Sometimes, yes, you want to impress your girls because, those are your peers and you have fun when you look cute together. People would know that I dress up for my runs, right? I just bought these shorts from Burnt and I'm looking forward to an outfit. I'm just bummed that the shoes aren't going to match with an outfit. And I was hoping I would have gotten new shoes to match. But also, it's not a great idea to break new shoes on race day. But I'm for a cute outfit moment, I would definitely do that, right? It's also part of the reason why I'm so sad to have joined an official running club. So I'm officially part of the Waterfall City Athletics Club, which means I will have to run races in my club colors. And guys, individualism and self-expression is something that I really, really enjoy. Something I find joy in. And so now that I have to let that go for the sake of wearing club colors, it is so sad. And Sunday's race is partly to celebrate all the times that I've gotten to run in my cute outfits and run by myself, and shown up as a unicorn, all pink, or in a skirt, a blue skirt, or a dress, you know what I mean? I've ran in all those things because I just need the moment to be cute and exciting so that I can survive. But I also understand that, hey, there is growth. And in this period or season of growth, I do want to improve my running. I do want to learn techniques. I do want to be on a training program. And part of that will come at a cost. And the cost, I suppose, is letting go of my individual sense of expression. I have to wear club colors and be uniform with everyone. And that's something I've reconciled. But I think in terms of our existence as a society, we need to embrace women's self-expression for their own sake, to say, hey, that girl loves wearing makeup, not for a man's approval, not for anyone else's eyeballs, but for their own sake. And that's not something that I see enough of, and it's such a shame that we beat this up out of women, or we create stereotypes about women who choose to express themselves in a particular way, that they want men, they slay queens, they whores, they this, they selling. There's always a stigma attached to a feminine woman. And I don't think that's fair, and those stigmas, just in closing, because this is getting longer, they have real negative consequences. I think my difficulty with connecting in relationships is not a coincidence. It's not something that happened accidentally. It's because of years of conditioning, where I've been told that my femininity is a weapon, that it's the thing that makes me a target, that it's not desirable or only desirable for men, and so I should tone it down if I didn't want to attract the male attention. And otherwise I'd fall into teenage pregnancy and my life would be ruined and you know what I mean. I think that is so detrimental to our well-being. And instead of having, those negative connotations around women's femininity, we need to have honest and open conversations about what it is that we fear as a society for women. What our experiences have been as older generations talking to younger ones and what they need to watch out for. Instead of fear mongering, we need to also call out perpetrators who prey on young girls, correct other boys' behaviors as well if their behaviors are also problematic, or in such that they're putting a young woman's future in danger. You know what I mean? I think there's room to have those open and honest conversations as opposed to just fear mongering. That said, I'm gonna let my dog bang my blanket or my leg or whatever. It is hella uncomfortable, and it's hard to not see that as, oh, have I failed, or what have I done wrong, or whatever. But I've come to learn that it's a very natural process for them, and it's just sexuality and I want to say now femininity is a very natural self-expression. It's a very natural, I want to say humane, but my dog is not humane act, or a natural human act, a natural act that comes because we're alive, and we express ourselves, and some of these things happen naturally. It's a part of us. So I shouldn't try to beat it out of him or shame him out of it or whatever. I'm gonna let him bang. And I know that we're gonna get stares, like people are gonna be staring at us if he does it publicly. I hope it doesn't, but if it does, it's not something I'm gonna stop either, because I don't carry shame about it. I don't think my dog has to feel shame about the fact that he wants to hump. It is very natural. It's something that obviously happens naturally because he hasn't learned it anyway. I got him when he was a baba. He was still very small. I'm sure he hasn't seen his mom humping anyway. You know what I mean? He hasn't been socialized at all. He hasn't been seeing other dogs other than on our walks. He hasn't gone to a daycare yet. He's only getting his 4th vaccination tomorrow at the vet. So after that, I can let him socialize with other dogs. So I can't say he's learned bad behaviors elsewhere. And I think experiencing this has helped me see sexuality and femininity by extension is something that's not inherently bad. I think sexuality for the longest time was something that I viewed as bad, as shameful, something that needed to be kept a secret, and that's why it's awkward talking about it, right? But that's not my shame to carry. That's not true. That's someone else's narrative. That's what I've been taught, and I need to remove that shame from my own conscience and from whoever taught it to me and give it back to them, because sexuality is a very natural, human act or feeling or process. Whatever it is, it's very natural. and it's why we procreate, it's why we exist, but not just for procreation, but for enjoyment, So yeah, maybe I'll explore the topic of sexuality in relation to this femininity conversation another day, but I really felt compelled to share this. In case you are somewhere feeling shamed for your femininity, don't. And by the way, even if you aren't overly feminine or whatever, you look like a tomboy. Rina said, I'm giving butch lesbian vibes sometimes. And you know what? I'll take it because I do. And either way is okay. Like, either identity or self-expression you choose is okay. You don't have to be anything that you don't want. You only just have to be what comes naturally to you. And that's the whole point. Anyway, I'm gonna end it there for today. This is the longest episode I've ever recorded, 40 minutes. But thank you guys for joining me. I really do appreciate each and every one of you for being here. I do not take it for granted. I look forward to seeing you again in the next episode. Please enjoy the rest of your day. I love you. Good night. Goodbye. Good day. Wherever you are. Bye.